Get out. Right now. Before I call security. The woman said it loud enough for the whole showroom to hear. Not a whisper, not a quiet word to the side. Loud, deliberate. The kind of loud that's meant to humiliate. The young man she was speaking to didn't flinch. He stood exactly where he was, one hand resting lightly on the hood of a silver Mercedes-Benz GLS, his eyes steady, his expression unreadable. He was wearing a faded gray hoodie, dark jeans with a fraying hem at the left knee, and a pair of running shoes that had seen better days 2 winters ago. He looked, by every measure this saleswoman had trained herself to use, like someone who did not belong here. What she didn't know, what no one in that showroom knew, was that the man she was trying to throw out had something on his phone. Something that would make her go very, very quiet the moment she saw it. But before we get to that moment, let me take you back to the beginning. Hartwell Auto Group sits on the corner of Yonge and Shepherd in North York, Toronto. Floor-to-ceiling glass, polished white tiles, new car smell so thick you can almost taste it. It's the kind of dealership where the vehicles on the floor cost more than most people's annual salary, and the salespeople know it. They can read a customer in 30 seconds flat. The shoes, the watch, the way someone holds themselves when they walk through the door. They have a word for customers they've already decided won't buy. They don't say it out loud. But everyone who works there knows what it means when a colleague raises an eyebrow across the floor. It was a Tuesday in late November, gray sky pressing down on the city, the kind of cold that bites through a jacket and reminds you that December is coming fast. The morning rush on the subway had just thinned out. The showroom was quiet. Lena Hargrove, 31, sales associate, 6 years at Hartwell, top closer 2 years running, stood near the reception desk in a fitted black blazer and heeled boots, coffee in hand, watching the front door. She saw him the moment he walked in. Darian Osimensa, 26, black, lean, 5'11", with close-cropped hair and an easy, unhurried way of moving that suggested he was entirely comfortable in his own body. The hoodie was North Face but old, the print across the chest cracked and fading. His running shoes were Nikes, not the kind people line up for. The kind people wear until they fall apart. He paused just inside the entrance, looked around the showroom the way you do when you're getting your bearings, and walked toward the GLS on the center platform. Lena watched him for exactly 4 seconds. Then she turned back to her phone. A junior colleague, Theo Warwick, 23, 2 months on the floor, moved to intercept. He was still at the stage of his career where he approached everyone. He hadn't learned to filter yet. "Morning," Theo said. "Can I help you find something?" Darian looked up. "I'm okay, thanks. Just having a look. Sure. Theo hovered. The GLS is a great vehicle. 7-seater, 6-cylinder, starts at around 118. Is that the range you're working with? It was a test question dressed up as helpful information. Nobody asks, is that the range you're working with, unless they're trying to figure out whether you can actually afford to be standing where you're standing. Darian gave him a small, polite smile. "I'll let you know if I need anything." Theo drifted back toward the desk. Lena had watched the whole exchange. She set her coffee down. She crossed the floor slowly, not rushing, the walk of someone who has decided something and is simply executing the decision. She stopped 2 feet from Darian. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't smile. "Can I ask what you're doing here?" Darian looked at her calmly. "Looking at the GLS. Are you looking to purchase? I might be. She repeated it the way people repeat something when they want you to hear how unlikely it sounds. Her eyes went to his shoes, came back up to his face. "We have a pretty significant wait list on that model, and our finance team is very thorough. There's a pre-approval process. I'm aware, are you?" Not a question. A statement. A wall dressed up as a sentence. She glanced toward the back office, then back at him. "I'm going to be honest with you. This is a high-volume day for us, and I have clients with appointments arriving in 20 minutes. If you're not here with a serious intention to purchase, I'd ask you to respect that, and I have serious intention to purchase." The words were flat and even. Not defensive, not annoyed, just factual. Something shifted in Lena's face, a recalculation happening just behind her eyes. She'd expected pushback or embarrassment. She'd gotten neither. She tried a different angle. Do you have financing arranged? I won't need financing. You're paying cash. I'm paying cash. The silence between them had weight to it. Sir. Her voice dropped, not softer, colder. I don't want to make this uncomfortable, but I have a responsibility to our other customers and to the floor environment. You've been standing here for a few minutes. You haven't taken any of our materials. You don't have an appointment. I didn't know I needed one to walk into a car dealership. And we've had situations in the past where individuals have come in and made other customers feel. She stopped herself, but not in time. Darian looked at her, just looked, the way someone looks when they want you to understand, without saying a word, that you just said exactly what you meant to say. Theo was watching from the desk. He'd gone very still. Lena straightened. She made the decision the way people make decisions when they've already gone too far to back down gracefully. Get out, right now. Before I call security. The showroom was not full, but it was not empty either. An older couple on the far side of the floor, white-haired, looking at the E-Class, had turned to look. A man in a down jacket near the entrance was watching over the top of a brochure. Theo stood at the desk with his hands flat on the counter. Darian did not move. He reached into the front pocket of his hoodie. For a moment, the room held its breath the way rooms do when no one wants to admit they're holding it. He pulled out a phone, unlocked it, tapped something, then held the screen out toward Lena. Take a look at that. She didn't want to. You could see it, the small, involuntary hesitation of someone who suddenly suspects they are about to be very wrong about something. She looked. It was a transfer confirmation. Dated that morning, timestamped 9:47 a.m., Hartwell Auto Group. Pre-authorized wire transfer, $124,000, cleared and pending allocation to inventory unit GLS the 407, requested by buyer Darian O.C. Mensah, authorized through Northern Trust Private Banking. Below the transfer confirmation was a second document, not a bank statement. A company registration. O.C. Mensah Holdings Inc. registered in Ontario. Year of establishment 3 years ago. Current assets listed for collateral verification, $11.4 million. Lena's face did not go pale all at once. It went in stages, the way color drains when your body understands something before your mind catches up. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. The phone screen was still facing her. The numbers weren't moving. They weren't going to change. Darian lowered his phone and put it back in his pocket. His voice, when he spoke, was the same quiet, even tone he'd used since he walked through the door. My name is Darian O.C. Mensah. I transferred $124,000 to this dealership at 9:47 this morning. I came in today to finalize the vehicle inspection, sign the paperwork, and arrange delivery. That's all. He let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. I'd like to speak with your general manager. Lena didn't move. Her coffee was getting cold on the reception desk behind her. Theo was already moving toward the back office. What happened next took about 45 minutes but felt like a lot longer. The general manager of Hartwell Auto Group was a man named Conrad Albrecht, 53, German-Canadian, 2 decades in the auto industry, silver hair buzzed tight at the sides, the kind of firm handshake that tells you he'd decided who you were before he even crossed the room. He came out from the back office with his hand already extended, his face already doing the thing that faces do when the situation has been briefly explained and damage control has begun. Mr. O.C. Mensah. Conrad Albrecht, I am deeply sorry for. I'd like this conversation documented, Darian said. Conrad blinked. I'm sorry? Everything that just happened. I'd like it in writing. The exact words that were used, the request to leave. I'd like a written record. Conrad's hand was still out. He lowered it slowly. Of course we can. I want you to know this is not reflective of how we do business here. What you experienced today is completely unacceptable, and I'm not interested in reassurance right now. Darian's voice was still careful, carrying the quiet authority of someone who had learned very young that raising your voice costs you something and keeping it level costs the other person more. I'm interested in the documentation, and I'd like to know your process for addressing what happened. Conrad looked like a man who had confidently walked onto a frozen lake and just heard the ice shift under his feet. He invited Darian to his office. He offered coffee. Darian declined. What Conrad Albrecht did not know yet, what he was about to find out in the next 20 minutes, was that Darian Osi-Mensah had not walked into Hartwell Auto Group as a private buyer. He had walked in as a private buyer who also happened to be the subject of an active due diligence process by Parkway Capital Partners, a Toronto-based private equity firm that had been quietly evaluating Hartwell Auto Group for potential acquisition for the past 11 weeks. Darian wasn't buying a car for himself. He was doing one final walkthrough, the kind that serious buyers do unannounced and incognito. Checking operational culture. Seeing how staff behaved when they didn't know they were being observed. He had his answer. He pulled out his phone again, this time opening an email thread. He turned the screen toward Conrad. The thread was between Darian and a woman named Isabel Fontaine at Parkway Capital. Subject line: Hartwell AOG, Phase 3 Assessment. The most recent email, sent at 8:30 that morning, read: Finalize site visit today and send recommendation by EOD. Board convenes Thursday. Conrad read it. He read it again. The color left his face the same way it had left Lena's. In stages, the slow-motion unraveling of a man realizing that the thing he thought was a small, manageable problem has roots that go somewhere he never expected. You're the Parkway contact, he said. One of them, Darian said. Another silence. This one was different from all the silences that had come before it. This one had a future in it. Conrad. Darian leaned forward slightly. I've been in this building for 42 minutes. In that time, a member of your sales team decided, based on how I was dressed, that I didn't belong here. She asked what I was doing, implied I couldn't afford the vehicle, told me this wasn't a comfortable floor environment for individuals like me, and instructed me to leave before calling security. That happened in front of at least 4 other customers and 1 junior colleague. He paused. This is not a personality problem. This is a culture problem. And culture is exactly what our firm is paid to assess. Conrad pressed his hands flat on the desk. Mr. Osi-Mensah, I give you my word that this does not represent. I'm going to stop you there. Not unkindly, just firmly. I've heard that sentence a lot. What I'm interested in is what changes, not what you say about what happened, what actually changes. Conrad was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost the damage control smoothness. He sounded like a man who had been caught, knew it, and was deciding whether to keep running or just stop. What would you need to see? He asked. Darian looked at him for a long moment. Then he opened his notebook. What followed in the next 6 weeks looked, from the outside, like a normal acquisition process. Meetings, documents, due diligence reports, legal review. But inside Hartwell Auto Group, something else was happening. Parkway Capital's assessment report, filed the Thursday after Darian's site visit, included 3 pages specifically on floor culture and customer treatment. It named the incident. It named Lena Hargrove. It named Conrad Albrecht's prior awareness. Because when investigators dug into HR records, they found 2 previous complaints from Black customers who had felt they were being dismissed on the showroom floor. Both had been logged. Neither had resulted in any action beyond a conversation. The report's recommendation was conditional acquisition pending mandatory implementation of third-party diversity and bias training, restructuring of the floor's greeting and qualification protocols, and an independent HR review of the complaint's history. Those conditions were non-negotiable. Lena Hargrove was placed on administrative leave pending the HR review's outcome. 3 weeks later, her employment at Hartwell Auto Group ended. In the termination letter, the grounds cited were discriminatory conduct toward a customer and violation of the dealership's customer service standards. Conrad Albrecht kept his position, but he spent the next 4 months in the most uncomfortable stretch of his professional life. overseeing mandatory changes to a floor culture he had allowed to calcify for years by pretending it wasn't there. Theo Warwick, the junior colleague who had stood at the desk and watched and said nothing, was required to complete a bystander intervention training program as part of the new protocols. He completed it. He also quietly wrote a statement for the 8R review, an accurate account of exactly what he had witnessed. He didn't have to. Nobody told him to. He just did it. When a journalist from a Toronto business outlet caught wind of the story, through a source close to the acquisition process, and called Darian for comment, Darian gave one short statement. "I went in to look at a car. I was asked to leave because of how I looked." That's the beginning and end of what happened. The rest is just business. He declined to say anything further. The story ran anyway, because the acquisition itself became public, and the circumstances of the site visit were impossible to separate from the deal. By the time it appeared in print, the comment section was already doing what comment sections do. People recognized something in the story that went beyond one car dealership in North York. They recognized the arithmetic of it. The split-second calculation that happens when someone looks at another person and decides, before a word has been exchanged, before a question has been asked, what that person can and cannot afford, what they deserve to access, what room they belong in. It wasn't about the car. It was never about the car. The car was just the surface of something that runs very deep and very wide, something that doesn't announce itself with a slur or a confrontation, but hides inside a question like, "Is that the range you're working with?" And a statement like, "I have clients with appointments." The older couple who had been looking at the E-Class across the showroom floor that morning, Margaret and David Price, both retired, from Etobicoke, spoke to the journalist. Margaret Price said she'd watched the whole thing and felt sick. She said she'd looked at her husband when it was happening, and they'd both looked away. She said she'd thought about that a lot in the weeks since. "We didn't say anything," she said. "We should have. I think about that." She paused. "Silence is a choice. I didn't understand that in my bones until I watched someone else be quiet for both of us." The GLS was delivered to Darian Mensa on a Friday afternoon in December. Silver exterior, black interior, exactly as specified. He signed the paperwork in the dealership office, the same office where Conrad Albrecht had sat across from him 6 weeks earlier. Conrad shook his hand at the door. It was a quieter handshake than the first one. Darian drove it home to his mother's house in Scarborough. He'd bought it for her. Her name is Vivian Mensa. She is 61 years old, a retired registered nurse who worked 33 years at Sunnybrook Hospital, raised 3 children largely on her own, and has never in her life owned a vehicle with more than 200,000 kilometers on it. When Darian pulled into the driveway and handed her the keys, she stood on the front step in her housecoat and didn't speak for almost 30 seconds. Then she said, "You're telling me you bought this car in a hoodie?" "In a hoodie." She shook her head slowly, the particular headshake of a black mother who spent a lifetime preparing her children for a world that judges them before they speak. "Good," she said, and she took the keys. "Here's what I want to say directly to you, because this story has been sitting with me. We talk a lot about discrimination like it always announces itself, like it comes with a slur or a fist or something unmistakable that makes it easy to name and impossible to defend. But most of the time, it doesn't look like that. It looks like a question. It looks like a raised eyebrow across a showroom floor. It looks like, is that the range you're working with? It looks like the assumption, made in 4 seconds, that someone doesn't belong somewhere. Not because of anything they've done, but because of how they look standing in a room that wasn't built with them in mind. Darian had something in his phone that proved his worth by the numbers a particular system respects, and I'm glad the story went the way it went. But here's the thing that won't let me go. What if he didn't? What if he was just a 26-year-old in a faded hoodie who wanted to look at a car? What if he had no transfer confirmation, no holding company, no private equity firm waiting on his report? What if he was just a man? Any man, Any woman who walked into a building they had every right to walk into and was told to leave. How many times does that happen and nobody documents it? How many times does it happen and the person just leaves because they've learned that fighting it costs more than it's worth? That's the question I want you to sit with. Drop your answer in the comments. Tell me what you would have done if you were Margaret Price at the E-Class display. Tell me if you've ever been Darian, or if you've ever, without meaning to, been Lena. I read every single one. If this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Dell Stories so you don't miss what's coming next, because the stories that matter are the ones that don't let you look away. And you just proved you're someone who doesn't.